The PBA 2024 season consists of 17 events. The first one, the PBA Players Championship, and the last one being the PBA Tour Finals, which happened just recently in early June. This is a list of the 17 events ranked by enjoyment. If you have any questions, make sure to comment below. The PBA 2024 season started off with what was one of the most entertaining telecasts I have ever watched in PBA. Featuring a couple new faces in the players Ryan Barnes and Nate Stubler, the telecast didn't fail to entertain the crowd. The crowd was extremely fired up for most of the telecast, unlike some of the other events this season. The players were also scoring decently high, and it made for a fun experience as it was more about throwing strikes and throwing a flashy shot, rather than throwing a slow and controlled angle. Definitely recommend watching this telecast if you haven't already, and maybe give it a second watch. Next telecast of the season was the US Open, which is both one of the hardest events of the year and also the most respected title to win, so the competition is always extremely tense. This telecast was highlighted by many missed spares and not a lot of strikes. Unlike the Players' Championship, this oil pattern forced players to play very straight and conservative in their angles. It was fun to watch, but if it wasn't considered a major event, it wouldn't be worth too much of a mention. Into Game 1, Bill O'Neill vs. EJ Tackett. These guys, at the time, were the peak of skill in the sport. Bill just came off of the Players' Championship, and EJ made a second straight show with a major win streak during match play leading up to the show. Now the games were all about spares. Both Bill O'Neill and EJ had issues with makeables. Now Bill started off with the front six, and EJ was lacking in the score department. But that all changed with a late game miss of the 1-2, 4-6, 10, with Bill chopping off just the head pin. This allowed EJ to strike in spare to tie it up. Yet again, Bill left the 1-2, 4-6, 10, taking out just the head pin yet again. Now skipping to the 10th, EJ ended with 2-12, and Bill O'Neill had to step up and get at least a double in the 10th, and got the first one, but left an unfortunate 10 pin to end the game. In the next game, against Kyle, EJ was in the same spot as Bill. Needing a double, EJ threw the first one, but went through the nose to lose the game, giving us this entertaining screen grab. The rest of the games weren't very close, so I won't cover them, but they were still very entertaining. The Illinois Classic. It's the first Classic event of 2024, however it wasn't very eventful. It was EJ's third straight show, but he was knocked out by Jake Peters in Game 1. AJ Johnson won this event in fast fashion. Telecast number 4, my personal least favorite event of the season so far, is the Pete Weber Missouri Classic. The only major thing that came out of this event was that Pete Weber threw the honorary shot to start the telecast. EJ had just made another telecast, Simonson dominated the tournament, and it was no different in the title match where he dominated Bill O'Neill 224 to 156. Wouldn't watch this one again if it weren't for this video, don't really bother rewatching this one. The Indiana Classic, however, was a great event in the early season. The players stayed fired up the whole competition, and they were all really fierce matches. Worth a watch to say the least. Marshall Kent, in this event, won his first title in 7 years and revived his career. He will definitely remember this event as his second big break in his career after he got Rookie in the Year in 2014. The Delaware Classic is, well, a classic. This telecast was set up to be an absolute classic with EJ Tackett, Tim Foy Jr., Bill O'Neill, and a few others. Although the main event was a newcomer, Bug Kroll. He made the stepladder as part of his first full year of professional bowling. He started his pro career with a bag by winning the pre-qualifying tournament and then proceeding to make the show immediately. Then he managed to win his first match in a very close roll-off against Bill O'Neill. This was it. Leading into the title match, Bug must have been extremely nervous as he could make or break his upcoming career in this match. Surprisingly, Bug managed to calm his nerves and, well, the rest is history. He won his first title, and Bug is pretty popular now. Would 1000% recommend watching this show, and definitely watch this one after you've watched everything else. The USBC Masters is always an interesting event. This year, it featured a tough pattern that was also asymmetrical. This show was very interesting. Held on Easter Sunday this year, featuring Tom Dombrowski, Jason Belmonte, Deron Booker, Richard Teese, and Sam Cooley. This telecast was a mix of unknown and very well-known players. Each of the players had a couple of stumbles along the way, with Jason Belmonte fumbling the 10th frame to lose the third match against Dombrowski, who threw an unfortunate 177 game in the title match to lose against D-Ron Booker, and D-Ron had his first title, which was a major. Good job to D-Ron. This story is pretty interesting, but if it wasn't a major, I wouldn't recommend watching it. Majors are always pretty fun, but this one was kinda eh. The Cheetah Championship event was an interesting event in the middle of the season featuring the young bowler Theo Bernard, who is known for winning several PBA regionals at a very young age of 19. The PBA Cheetah pattern is usually very tough for players, and so the scoring is typically low, and spares are the main component of scoring. Theo swept the entire bracket in dominant fashion. This will be a telecast to remember. The Scorpion Championship was kind of boring, although we did get to see a pair of friends, Packy and Kevin Williams, bowl each other in the middle in match number 3. Other than that, the show was uneventful. The Shark Championship was also somewhat uneventful, although we saw EJ Tackett finally claim a title this season after making almost every show in the early season. He finally had a break after all of those unfortunate fails, and, well, he got his first title of the season. Now, onto the PBA TOC, as one of my favorite events of the season by a decent margin. The story of Marshall Kent showing up all the time and finally getting the respect he deserved after being one of the best rookies during 2014, wanting to quit but never giving up. Now, the actual telecast was very interesting, with an incredibly tense title match and some decently high scores. This telecast also had some interesting people to watch, like Marshall Kent and EJ Tackett, who made almost every telecast this season. Now, this event is not what people would call their favorite telecast, but from many perspectives, and mine, it is at least a top 5 this season. Now, to my favorite event this season, the PBA World Championship. It's a 2-part event this year. The first telecast was better in my opinion, but you can't always win. Featuring some interesting people like Eric Jones and Packy Hanrahan, most of the early matches were tense. The crowd was probably the most intense they have been by far since the pandemic in 2020. The scores were really high and the players were hyped up during the whole event. Packy shot some good games, and Eric Jones was the one who made it to the second telecast. And at the end, Boog actually won as his second title. The Roth-Holman doubles event this year was pretty intense, with iconic duos such as Bill O'Neill and Jason Belmonte. They were back in the stepladder, ready to win yet another time. The show was pretty interesting, and the matches were somewhat close, with Chris Prather and Andrew Anderson taking the title in a match of 233 to 215. These matches are always pretty fun, seeing how the duos play off each other, hyping each other up, and calming them down if something goes wrong. Definitely recommend watching this one. Watch it again if you haven't. The PBA Playoffs was the longest event this year, also one of the most interesting. The expectation was that Kyle Troup might have a repeat win after a few titles that he has already won up to this point. The title is also played on what is usually considered to be an easy pattern, so the scores were pretty high, and strikes are very common. However, Boog managed to win a couple of matches in a row, and had a couple of tight games against Jesper Svensson to take the game 1-1. After 2 games, because of the roll-off rules, they had to play a 9th and 10th roll-off. After a light 9-pin, Svensson had to step up and at least force Boog to throw the first strike, and with a light shaker, he did it. He won one of the most important events of the year. Congrats, Boog. Due to the nature of the telecasts, I'm not going to include All-Star Weekend as a telecast to watch. Watch it. But, because of the rules of this, I'm not going to rank it because it would obviously be number 1.